Tails. Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Isto. You've reached chapter 29 of Tarot Tales, a weekly gathering where I tell a little known fairy tale, folk tale, myth, legend, still working on what word to use there. Those of you that have been with me throughout this journey know that this week we are talking about the Knight of Cups. This is our third Knight card for this season. Knights in general are known to be cards of action, of movement, which makes sense. Most of them are on horses. If you've been paying attention to the other episodes, you may notice that this week's horse looks a little different from the energies. So I'll just take a minute, take a look at the card itself, and notice what pops out to you. What symbolism may be more apparent from previous episodes, or what's the energy of the card that pops out for you? Let me know in the comments or the chat. For me, the thing that is the most notable is the horse. This horse is chill. It is taking us very peacefully on our journey. We also have the recurrence of the wings on the feet and the helmet. And then if you look really closely at the tunic, this has been where a lot of the symbolism has been hidden from me. If you can't quite tell, those are little fishies, little red fishies. And as we've talked about before, the cups are the suit of water, of the hearts in the modern card deck. This represents emotion, wings, fish, creativity, fluidity, being in touch with one's emotions, as we see again and again with water. And this knight is kind of very casually moving forward, holding forward the cup as if they're going to go. So that's basically what this card is representing. It's representing chivalry, action in the pursuit of love, following one's emotions, following one's impulses, being led by that in a calm and suave way, chivalry and the like. Of course, we drew this card upside down, and so that could mean a number of different things in this realm. Perhaps our emotions are getting the better of us. Perhaps we are following them and we probably shouldn't. Perhaps we are kind of going off the rails and being led exclusively by our impulses. And that is exactly where our story for this week comes into play. Got an incredible story for you all from Hawaii. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about our cocktail. This week, I am drinking the Shark's Tooth, which I juiced an actual pineapple to make. And I'm really excited to try it. I think it's going to be good. So let's give it a shot. Quite good. You're not used to having whiskey in a kind of like Hawaiian drink, but it balances out nice. Love pineapples. And for those of you that do not drink alcohol this week, I believe we had the watermelon sour, which I'm not sure how that's going to go with the seedlip garden, but let me know if you give it a shot. Regardless of whether or not you are drinking with me, joining me live or later, simply for being here, I give you a hearty cheers. And with that, please let me remind myself to ask you all, if you haven't already, to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help unlock a lot of tools for me. All right, let's dive into the story for this week. Now, there's a lot of backstory I got to provide you. And the first thing I need to do is talk to you about a book that does not even contain the story that I'm telling you today, because it's absolutely amazing and more people in the world need to know about it. So this book, The Legends and Myths of Hawaii, was written by His Hawaiian Majesty Kalakaua, one of the last monarchs of the Hawaiian Empire. And he has a fascinating story. So around like 1778, Americans started getting much more involved in the Hawaiian sphere. So much so, as Americans are wont to do, that we took over a vast majority of the political influence on the island and had so much assimilation occur that by around 1880, when King Kalakaua came into power, the Hawaiian population had been decimated with about 44,000 people. That's a rough estimate from what I was able to read, but a severe reduction in the representation of the native people. King Kalakaua decided that one of the primary ways that he was going to try and build back influence and fight Western colonialism was to reinvigorate the arts. And he did this in a couple of really interesting ways. He insisted that he have a coronation because he knew people would want to watch. He rebuilt the palace in Hawaii, and he went on a world tour. In fact, if you look him up, these are one of the biggest facts that you're going to find about him, which is he's the first magistrate to circumnavigate the world. It took him 271 days, and he met powers all across the world. Unfortunately, it led to a lot of powers thinking that Hawaii was for sale, which it was not, but it did expand his influence. And shortly after he returned, he wrote this book of myths. And there's some criticisms that maybe it's a little too Greco-Roman, it's got too much of a Gothic feel to it, but that was okay because it was deeply appealing to people that were not Hawaiian. In fact, this book wasn't published in a Hawaiian language originally. Its primary purpose was to exude a kind of cultural soft power across the world to show the influence, the beauty, and the majesty of Hawaii, which up till that point was looked down upon as some form of like lesser paganistic rituals. So I thought this was just absolutely incredible, and I wanted to share that with you, even though that's not the story that we've got from here. Oh, and the wildest thing in here, there's a story in here about Hawaii and Japan's like long-term connection. It's called like the Iron Key or something, about a shipwreck of a Japanese sailing ship. And it was kind of like an FU to the West, being like, oh, we've known them for a much longer time. And the wildest thing in here is that at one point, Kalakaua proposed to Emperor Meiji of of Japan that he could become empire of a new nation called Oceania, connecting all of the oceans or all of the islands between Hawaii and Japan. And the emperor declined politely. But how wild is that? I love we got to respect the ambition. And I can't imagine what that would have done to the world or if it even would have worked. But I felt like you all needed to know that. Aside from that, there are a couple of vocab words that I need to get you up to speed on. And apologies in advance. I did try my best to look up and practice pronunciation, but I very well could be mispronouncing any of these. So please do correct me if I get any of these wrong. I'm just going to try my best. So vocab words. Kihei is a word that we're going to use to refer to kind of a shawl that would go over you. Mua is a men's house, so like a house where the men at a certain age would gather together. Koele is a term referring to going to work on the chief's land. So if you had a chief, he would maybe have his own garden or plantation, and everyone in the town and the village would come and work on it at a certain point. Kahuna is a word that you may know, and I actually thought meant wave when I started doing my research this week. I thought big kahuna, it was a big wave, because it's been deeply, deeply, deeply misappropriated. It actually means expert in a specific field, and for this story, it's going to refer to like a magical expert. We're going to use kahunas to talk with the gods. I also learned that the term big kahuna, I guess this should have been more apparent to me, is problematic and probably shouldn't be used by most people because it is disrespectful of the spiritual underpinnings of the Hawaiian people, kind of like totem pole. So good to learn that. And then finally, maka is this term that is referring to a vessel, a human vessel into which a god could like show up and like communicate with people. So just repeating that, we've got kihei, which is a shawl, mua, a men's house, uh, koele, which is working on a chief's land, kahuna, which is a magician expert, and maka, which is a vessel for possession. Aside from that, I think we'll be good to go. So with that, let us begin. Chapter 29, The Shark Man. Once upon a time, there was a god named Kamahawali. Kamahawali was a shark god. This meant that he could change form between shark and man whenever he wanted as he flitted across the sky. And he had a number of special caves he liked to stay in Waipio, Hawaii. One day, he took notice of a beautiful woman named Kale, who jumped from a high cliff and splashed into the water and dipped into the water without making a splash. He immediately fell in love. He was transfixed with her and noted that she would go out fishing every single day. But when the weather was bad, all of her friends would not come with her. And so he conspired a specific way to meet her. He decided that he would brew a terrible storm and ensure that she would come alone and that she would get swept up in it. And sure enough, one day he cast down a storm, she came alone, but he made it just strong enough that she, as strong of a swimmer as she was unable to overpower the waves, and she started to drown. At which point, the god Kamahawali came in, rescued her in human form, and brought her to land. This was their meet cute. The two fell in love, and very quickly, Kale became pregnant with Kamahawali's son. It was around this time that Kamahawali decided, it was so nice to meet you. This was really wonderful, but I've got to go back and do some god things. And he made his exit. She said, wait, no, I'm going to have your child. He was like, yeah, I know, that's kind of why I'm leaving. And he informed her that her son, their son, would be a demigod. That this demigod would be able to transform between human and shark at will, and gave one piece of advice, that son was never to taste meat, should be fed entirely on plants. Otherwise, something terrible would happen. And with that, Kamahawali disappeared. It wasn't before long that Kale gave birth to Nanaue. Now, Nanaue was a normal man, with the exception that he had a shark's mouth on his back. Kale didn't really know what to do about any of this, and so her and her family agreed never to speak of it, and covered Nanaue with a kihei shawl to hide his back. They agreed they'd never speak of it, and they forbid Nanaue, who is a very beautiful child, from ever playing with any other kids, lest they would discover that he had a shark's mouth on his back. This worked pretty well for a while, and they continued to live their life in relative peace until Nanaue came of age and became old enough to visit the Mua with his grandfather. His grandfather did not understand why his daughter insisted that his grandson not be allowed to eat meat. He wanted better for his son. He wanted his grandson. He wanted him to grow into a fierce and strong warrior. And so, in the Mua, fed him secretly meat day after day after day. It so happened that Nanaue grew a taste for meat and began consuming so much food that they would tease him that he had a shark's appetite. Little did they know that he spent his time not playing with other children, tending to the taro and potato field in his mother's garden. And as people would walk on their way to the ocean, Nanaue would stop them and say, "Hey, where are you going?" They'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to go over to the ocean. I'm going to go take a dip." And Nanaue would say very mysteriously, "Be careful. I've heard there are sharks in the water." And they'd say, "Ha ha ha ha!" And then they'd move forward and jump into the ocean. At which point, Nanaue would jump into the ocean after them, turn into a shark, and eat them. So slowly, all the people in the village began to notice that this person or that person had disappeared from their normal activities, and they began to get worried. It was around this time that King Umi decided to institute the koele, and all the people in the village were to come together and work on his farm. And everyone did so, with the exception of Nanaue. This enraged everyone else in the village, as they were having to work and he was not. And so he was brought forward to King Umi. King Umi asked him why he was not working on the koele. Nanaue explained, I didn't realize that I was supposed to do that. I'm really sorry. If I had known, I would have done." Rather than punish him, King Umi said, "All right, this is a handsome, strapping, strong man. We'll have him come and work for us. We'll forgive him this one time." So Nanaue worked on the field, and it was grueling work. So grueling, in fact, that after a while, all the other men took off their kiheis. But Nanaue kept his on, which led all of the other children to be suspicious. And so, playing as if it was a joke, they jostled him and knocked off his kihei, at which point the shark's mouth was revealed, and it snapped on the hand of one of the boys, who screamed as his hand was cut off. Ah! Nanaue ran off to the cliff, jumped into the water, and before the eyes of all the villagers who had gathered around the cliff, watched him transform into a shark. Suddenly they realized what had been happening to all of the people of the village. They were furious. They brought Kale in front of King Umi and demanded that she be killed for the sins of her son. Kale explained that she had fallen in love with the god Kamahawali, and that they had had this child together. King Umi knew that Kamahawali was a wise and just god, and so decided that he would ask his shark kahunas to make sacrifices so that they could ask Kamahawali what he was thinking and what he wanted. And lo and behold, it worked. It wasn't before long that King Kamahawali took his way into Amaka's body and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they explained what had happened. And Kamahawali said, yeah, I told them not to feed him meat, and they did such a good job. It was the grandfather. Unfortunately, he's dead now. I would kill my son, but these are kind of extenuating circumstances. So here's what I'm proposing. No punishment for Kale, because she didn't really do anything wrong. She's trying her best. And Nanaue just can never come back to Hawaii. King Umi looked at the god and said, "Yeah, that sounds fair." And so Nanaue, after being told about this vision from his mother, made his way to Maui, where he transformed into human form and was seen as so charming, so handsome, that the chief gave his sister in marriage to Nanaue. The two were married, but Nanaue had a very specific request. He indicated that the two should always sleep in different houses for some reason that no one could completely understand. Nonetheless, they agreed and lived a very happy life for about a year. Until after a while, the love and newness of their marriage began to fade, and Nanaue began hungering for human flesh once again. He kept trying to repress the feeling, push it down deep below. But one day, as he watched a little girl walking by the ocean, he was overcome with his hunger, pushed her into the ocean, jumped in, turned into a shark, and destroyed her. Little did he know there was a fishing boat nearby that came back, reported it to the chief, his wife, and the rest of the town, who chased him out of town, which he was very narrowly able to escape from. Nanaue set sail once again, and he found his way to Molokai. There in Molokai, he got very quickly back up to his old shenanigans. He wrapped his kihei around himself, hid his shark's mouth. And as people were walking by towards the ocean, he would ask them, "Hey, where are you going?" They'd be like, "I'm going to the ocean." Be like, "Watch out, there are sharks in the water." They would say, "Ha!" And they'd move in, and then they'd end up disappearing. Well, this started happening again and again and again. And so the chief asked the shark kahunas once again to reach out for a message from the gods, at which point a god came forward and said, "Yes, well, there is something going on. So if anyone is acting suspicious or is referencing some kind of shark attack, you should tear that person's kihei off, and everything will make sense after that." So the chief shared that message with the rest of the people, and the village soon came to be on the lookout. And eventually, as somebody was walking by the ocean, and Nanaue said, "Hey, where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to the ocean." He said, "Be careful, there are sharks in the water." They said, "Oh, okay. Let's be safe then," and ran back to the village and warned the rest of the villagers that they were pretty sure that this new visitor, Nanaue, had something tricky going on. So all of the villagers prepared nets. They came forward, they ripped the kihei off of Nanaue, saw the shark mouth on his back, and began throwing nets over him. However, he was a very strong demigod, and he was able to break free and make his way to the ocean covered in the nets and turn himself into a shark. And he was about to get away, but the chieftain had made a very intelligent call to reach out to another demigod that lived on Molokai, Una Una. They brought Una Una with them, and he was able to pick up Nanaue. Pick up Nanaue and carry him up the top of the mountain, where he held him tight and instructed all of the townspeople to gather bamboo and other things to start a fire. And they put Nanaue to fire, but all the blood and all the water from his skin put out the water. So Una Una had the idea to cut open all of his skin to dry out the shark's skin and then burn it. Because if you don't burn a shark demigod entirely, his spirit will go into another shark and the system will perpetuate itself. It's a huge systemic problem. So they cut him up with the bamboo and are able to finally burn Nanaue. And if you go to Molokai, you may well visit a specific mountain called Pu'umano Mountain. And on Pu'umano Mountain, there's a large gorge that leads its way up to a flat landing. And that is the same path that Una Una dragged Nanaue up to be burned, saving the islands of Hawaii once and for all. The end. There's also like a weird ending to this where Kamahawali is frustrated that they used bamboo to murder his son. And so they institute, he basically lays a curse on the bamboo in Hawaii and indicates that it can never be sharp or cut again. And so I spent like, I'd say about an hour trying to read about Hawaiian bamboo. But I couldn't find anything specific about that. So if at any point anybody watching this learns what that was referring to, please do let me know because I'm very curious. All right. Well, that was the show for this week. Thanks for sticking around. I had meant to put this up on Twitch, but it just was not working out for me. So this week I decided to try and make the show work with some household knickknacks and see how that worked. Was the clown creepy enough? How did it work? Let me know. My gratitude for this week. We had the shark's tail. Since the Knight of Cups is all about chivalry and suitorship, I wanted to give a gratitude to one of my thank you nexts. So this gratitude goes out to Emilio, one of my first relationships. What a wild ride. It was fun to figure things out together. I hope you're doing well, whatever you're doing, and I hope you're still making art. Thank you for being a part of my journey. All right. Next week is chapter 30 of Tarot Tales. I hope you'll join me. I'm super excited about it. We're staying in what would have been the Empire of Oceania. We're going to be telling the tale of the Island of Dolphin Women. Should be super fun. And I will be drawing the next 10 cards for book 4 of Tarot Tales, which I've got some really exciting things planned for. So I hope you're able to join me. But until then, oh, before I do that, I needed to give you a tip about the clue. Last week, the indication on the clue was maybe a little confusing. So I just wanted to point out that there should be a line connecting Tyler and Waco. It looks like the line is coming from 2, and if you draw it like that on the map, then it's not a big deal. But there needs to be a line connecting Tyler and Waco in order for you to get the letter that that clue is pointing towards. All right. May you be happy or brave enough to sit with whatever else arises. May you be healthy. May you treat yourself with love and respect. May you continue to grow and find the strength to persevere through the painful parts of growth. May you find inspiration all around you. And may you find peace. Thank you for joining me this week. Until next week, bye, y'all.